A cold wind howled across the barren landscape of Eridani, 9, carrying with it the scent of blood and scorched metal. Captain Elias Cade stood at the edge of the makeshift barricade, gripping his rifle as he surveyed the battlefield below. Jagged ridges of black stone stretched for miles, a perfect natural defense, if only they had the numbers to hold it. The Dominion's forces were gathering beyond the horizon, their shimmering war machines assembling in perfect formation. Cade's jaw tightened. He had seen this before. The Dominion, an empire of cold efficiency, believed in overwhelming force. Against any other species, their strategy worked. But humanity had a reputation, a legend whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy. The Dominion thought they had seen the worst of mankind. They were about to learn otherwise. Cade turned to his troops, a ragged yet determined force. Their armor was scratched, their weapons scavenged from fallen enemies, but their eyes burned with the unyielding fire of survival. "We hold the line," Cade said, his voice carrying over the wind. "Not for glory. Not for revenge. We hold because no one else will." A rumble in the distance signaled the beginning of the assault. The Dominion's war machines began their advance, gleaming bipedal walkers, aerial drones, and infantry squads marching with eerie precision. Cade took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This battle wouldn't be won with brute force. It would be won with human ingenuity, resilience, and sheer defiance. The first explosions lit up the battlefield. The fight for survival had begun. The ground trembled beneath the boots of Captain Elias Cade as he watched the Dominion forces advance. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning fuel and ozone as the first wave of alien soldiers descended upon the human defenses. Cade turned sharply to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mira Han, her dark eyes scanning the battlefield with a focus only a battle-hardened officer could maintain. "Activate the minefields," he ordered, his voice calm but resolute. Mira didn't hesitate. "On it, sir." She tapped a series of commands into her wrist console, and moments later, the landscape erupted with a cacophony of explosions. The Dominion's advance was momentarily halted as they were forced to navigate the deadly traps laid by the Terran forces. "Good," Cade muttered. "Keep them off balance. Every second counts." Despite the early successes, Cade knew they couldn't sustain this for long. The Dominion was relentless, and they had the advantage in numbers and firepower. The human strategy was simple: survive, fight back in ways they couldn't anticipate, and force the enemy to adapt. As the Dominion infantry began to regroup, Cade's soldiers moved swiftly through the rocky terrain. They had set up a series of hidden positions in caves and behind natural rock formations, ready to ambush any alien forces who dared to venture too far from the main group. Lieutenant Han, always quick to think on her feet, had already devised a series of clever traps. From concealed pits lined with jagged stone to explosive charges camouflaged in the dirt, the humans were making it impossible for the Dominion to predict their next move. They used the terrain to their advantage, pulling the enemy into the chaos of their well-designed ambushes. The first clash between human and alien soldiers was brutal. Dominion soldiers in their black armor, wielding plasma rifles, charged forward with the cold precision of an unstoppable machine. But the humans had something the Dominion lacked: creativity. A group of Terran snipers, positioned high in the ridgelines, opened fire. The first few Dominion soldiers fell before they even knew where the shots were coming from. Then, from a concealed cave entrance, a team of human soldiers emerged, charging with a combination of explosives and fire. The Dominion troops were momentarily disoriented, unable to track all the scattered human forces. Cade's radio crackled to life. "Sir, enemy command is calling for reinforcements. A fleet of ships is inbound." He didn't need to ask for specifics. He could already see the massive shadows in the sky, Dominion warships descending like harbingers of doom. Cade's grip on his weapon tightened. The reinforcements would tip the scales, but the human forces were far from finished. "Send out the signal." "No retreat, no surrender," Cade ordered. "We'll make them pay for every inch." As the Dominion reinforcements began their descent, Cade felt a stirring of hope. The battle was far from over, and despite the overwhelming odds, there was something the aliens didn't understand: humans didn't give up. They didn't break. They didn't kneel. "Prepare for the next wave," Cade shouted, his voice cutting through the roar of battle. "This is just the beginning." With a sudden burst of activity, his soldiers activated the next phase of their plan. Explosive charges planted around the perimeter began to detonate, sending shockwaves through the advancing Dominion lines. In the midst of the chaos, Cade saw something extraordinary: Dominion soldiers hesitating, confused, unsure of how to proceed. The human soldiers, on the other hand, knew exactly what to do. They fought like their lives depended on it because, to them, they did. The Dominion, with their vast fleets and superior technology, had never encountered this kind of relentless willpower. As the Dominion forces adjusted their tactics, Cade knew one thing for certain: their victory would not come easy. But humanity's ultimate weapon was one the Dominion could never replicate: the drive to survive, the refusal to accept defeat. And it was that unbreakable spirit that would prove to be the downfall of the invaders. The sky over Eridani 9 darkened as the first of the Dominion's orbital bombardment cannons fired, sending a streak of fire toward the planet's surface. The shockwave rattled Cade's bones, and the ground beneath his feet trembled. He knew the bombardment had begun. The clock was ticking, and humanity's time was running out. "Sir, we've just intercepted Dominion communications." Mira Han's voice was urgent as she approached Cade's position. "They've launched their planetary disruptor. We have less than 20 minutes before the weapon activates. If it fires, the entire surface of Eridani 9 will become uninhabitable." Cade's heart sank. The disruptor, a massive weapon designed to wipe entire planets clean of life, was humanity's worst nightmare. It was capable of not only decimating their defenses but rendering their world barren and unlivable. Eridani 9, the last stronghold of humanity in this region of space, would be lost forever. "Then we've got no time to waste," Cade said grimly, his jaw clenched in determination. "We'll take it down, or we die trying." The human forces moved with purpose, rushing to the command center where the disruptor was being controlled. Cade's mind raced as he thought of a way to get inside. The Dominion had fortified the facility heavily, with automated defense turrets and roving patrols making it nearly impossible to breach. But the Terrans had one advantage the Dominion didn't anticipate: their sheer ability to improvise. "Lieutenant," Cade barked, "we're going to need a distraction. Set up the EMP charge at their perimeter defenses. Buy us a few minutes." Mira nodded. "On it, sir." The plan was risky, too risky, but there was no other choice. With their backs to the wall, Cade's forces had no room for hesitation. They would have to strike fast, hit hard, and pray they could disable the disruptor before the countdown reached 0. As Cade and his strike team approached the facility, the eerie silence was shattered by the roar of the Dominion's war machines in the distance. They had learned from previous engagements that the Dominion preferred overwhelming force, something that could be used against them. Cade's plan was simple: make the enemy think they were being attacked by a full force of humans while a smaller team infiltrated the facility. "Commence the attack," Cade ordered. At his signal, explosions lit up the horizon. The human soldiers stormed forward, pretending to be a larger force than they were. The Dominion responded predictably, focusing their fire on the decoys while the real team moved toward the heart of the facility. Cade's team slipped past the initial defenses with relative ease, using the chaos outside to mask their movements. They reached the main entrance of the disruptor control room, but the door was sealed shut with thick alloy plating. Cade cursed under his breath. "We're going to need another way in," he said. "Mira, any ideas?" Mira stepped forward, pulling a small device from her belt. "I've got a plasma cutter. It'll take a few minutes, but we'll get in." As the plasma cutter hummed to life, Cade's nerves were on edge. Every second felt like an eternity. Outside, the sounds of the battle raged, but there was nothing Cade could do to help his soldiers. They were on their own. The fate of Eridani 9, and humanity, rested entirely on the success of this mission. The cutter made slow progress, cutting through the thick steel. Cade could hear footsteps approaching, the Dominion soldiers unaware of the human team lying in wait. They were almost through the door when the first of the Dominion troops appeared. "On my mark," Cade whispered. The team crouched low, weapons aimed, eyes locked on the approaching enemy. "Now!" Cade shouted. The strike team opened fire, catching the Dominion soldiers off guard. In the chaos, Cade's team stormed through the door, making their way inside the heart of the Disruptor's control room. The walls were lined with strange alien technology, humming with energy as the weapon powered up. Time was running out. "We've got 10 minutes, Mira said, her voice strained with urgency. "We need to disable the power core or we're all dead." Cade nodded, his mind focused. "Split up. Find the power core. We take it down now, or it's over for all of us." As Cade and his team sprinted through the facility, they encountered increasingly dangerous resistance. Automated defense turrets whirred to life, blasting energy bolts toward the intruders. One of Cade's soldiers, Corporal Leona's, fell, but Cade didn't have time to mourn. "There's the core!" Mira shouted. They reached a massive, pulsating energy chamber at the center of the facility. The core was heavily guarded, but Cade's team was relentless. They pushed forward, their fear replaced by adrenaline, their drive to survive stronger than any of the alien forces in their path. Cade reached the core's main console, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're going to need more firepower," he muttered, then turned to his team. "Plant the explosives. We'll have to overload the core manually." As the explosives were set, Cade's heart raced. The countdown was ticking down, but humanity's resolve was stronger than any threat they faced. The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. The Dominion thought they could wipe them out with a single strike. They were about to find out that humans, when pushed to the brink, could accomplish the impossible. The air in the Disruptor control room was thick with tension as Cade's team set the final explosives around the massive power core. Every second felt like an eternity, the looming threat of the weapon's activation a constant reminder of the fragile line between life and death. Cade's eyes darted between his soldiers, each of them working with a singular purpose. They knew the stakes. 10 minutes, Mira Han called out, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to move now." Cade didn't answer. He was focused on the task at hand. His fingers danced over the console, trying to override the final security protocols. His pulse raced, his body tensed with the strain. He knew that once the explosives were set, they'd have little time to escape before the whole facility became a tomb. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the facility, an explosion from the outer perimeter. Cade's heart skipped a beat. The Dominion had breached their outer defenses. The main assault force was on its way. "Mira," Cade said, his voice gruff, "get those charges armed. We need to blow this thing now or we're all going to die." Mira nodded without hesitation. She sprinted to the control panel, flipping switches and arming the explosives. The tension was palpable. Cade could feel the weight of their mission bearing down on him, and for a brief moment, he thought of the soldiers fighting outside. He had promised them they would survive. He couldn't fail them now. As Mira worked, the facility's lights flickered. The countdown was running out. Only minutes remained. Suddenly, a harsh voice crackled through the comms. "This is Commander Threx of the Dominion. Surrender now, or we will fire the Disruptor. Your resistance is futile." Cade's teeth clenched. "You'll never break us," he muttered under his breath. Before he could give another order, the door behind them burst open, and a squad of Dominion soldiers stormed into the room. Their black armor gleamed in the dim light as they raised their weapons, aiming at Cade and his team. "Get down!" Mira shouted, shoving Cade to the floor as a hail of plasma fire erupted toward them. Cade rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding a deadly bolt. His mind raced as he scrambled to his feet, taking in the dire situation. The explosives weren't fully armed, and the Dominion had them pinned in the heart of the facility. "Mira," Cade gritted out, "you have to finish arming the charges." "I'll cover you." Without hesitation, Mira nodded, her face set in a grim line. She turned back to the console, fingers flying over the panel to set the final detonation sequence. Cade turned toward the advancing Dominion soldiers, his rifle snapping up to his shoulder as he opened fire. The first few shots rang true, striking down 2 Dominion soldiers before they could return fire. But the numbers were overwhelming. For every enemy that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place. Cade's team fought valiantly, but the situation was slipping from their control. Leonas! Cade yelled, spotting one of his soldiers trying to reach the explosives. But before the young corporal could make it, a Dominion soldier landed a direct hit, sending him crumpling to the ground in a heap of blood and armor. Leonas! Cade shouted again, but the soldier was gone. He couldn't afford to mourn now. Every second counted. Myra's voice cut through the chaos. Explosives are ready, Captain. We just need to get out. But as soon as the words left her mouth, the facility shook violently. The outer walls trembled, and the ground beneath their feet buckled as the Dominion's orbital bombardment struck again, this time closer to their location. Mira! Cade shouted, grabbing her by the arm. Now! With a final push, Mira hit the detonation switch. The explosives hummed to life. Cade heard the faintest whine, then an explosion that sent shockwaves through the facility. The power core's defenses crumbled as the energy chamber began to destabilize. Cade's heart raced. They had done it. The disruptor was disabled, but the blast was far from over. The facility was coming down around them. We've got to move. Cade barked. As the team sprinted for the exit, the very ground seemed to implode behind them. The walls cracked, the ceiling groaned, and an intense heat began to radiate from the wreckage. Cade pushed through, dragging the wounded along as they made their way to the evacuation point. Just as they reached the exit, the building buckled. A massive piece of debris crashed down in front of them, blocking the path. Cade turned to his team, his eyes scanning their faces. They were so close, yet so far from safety. We'll make it, Cade said, though his words felt hollow. We've got to keep moving. Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed through the corridor. A chunk of the wall disintegrated, and out of the smoke and debris, a lone Dominion soldier appeared, his plasma rifle raised. Cade didn't hesitate. He dove forward, tackling the soldier to the ground, and with a swift motion, disarmed him, crushing his weapon underfoot. But the fight wasn't over. A group of Dominion soldiers was advancing quickly, forcing Cade's team to fall back. We're not leaving anyone behind. Cade shouted. Just then, one of his soldiers, Sergeant Marlowe, stepped forward, bloodied but determined. I'll cover the rear, Captain, he said, locking eyes with Cade. Go. Save the others. Cade opened his mouth to protest, but Marlowe raised his hand. I've got this. And just like that, Sergeant Marlowe turned, positioning himself between the Dominion forces and the retreating team. Cade wanted to argue, to pull him back, but there was no time. Marlowe had already made his choice. As Cade and the survivors sprinted for the last escape shuttle, Marlowe's gunfire echoed behind them, keeping the Dominion at bay. But the sound faded as the shuttle's engines roared to life, lifting off from the shattered surface of Eridani 9. The battle was far from over, but humanity had survived, against all odds. And in the aftermath of their victory, they would honor the sacrifices made, knowing that their survival was not just a triumph of technology, but of will. The shuttle rocketed through the atmosphere, the fiery remnants of Eridani 9's once vibrant landscape now fading into the distance. Cade's mind raced, the chaotic aftermath of the battle a blur of noise and emotion. He was surrounded by the wounded, the dead, and the survivors, some of whom were physically unscathed but haunted by the sacrifice they had just witnessed. The blast had been a victory, but it had come at an unimaginable cost. Sergeant Marlowe's final stand, buying the rest of the team time to escape, was a memory that would stay with Cade forever. The man had given his life so that others might live. His final words, uttered with conviction, still echoed in Cade's mind, we fight for each other. Always. Asterisk. Cade's jaw clenched as he stared out the shuttle's viewport, watching the planet shrink into nothingness. The Dominion had underestimated humanity, but Cade knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the Empire had many worlds, many weapons. The fight was far from over. Mira Han sat beside him, her face pale and tired, but her eyes were fierce with resolve. "What now, Captain?" she asked, breaking the silence that had settled in the shuttle. Cade turned to her, his expression hardening. "Now, we rebuild. We lick our wounds, and we prepare for what's next. The Dominion will come for us again. And next time, we'll be ready." He glanced at the rest of the team, who were tending to the wounded or staring solemnly out the windows. Each of them had faced horrors beyond imagination, and yet, they had endured. Cade had seen the best and worst of humanity, but it was moments like these that proved what they were truly capable of. It wasn't just technology that had won the day. It was their will. Their humanity. The journey to their next destination was long, and every moment of it weighed heavily on Cade. He knew that the war was far from over. They had won the battle, but the Dominion Empire was vast and powerful. And for every victory humanity claimed, the enemy would strike back harder. Still, Cade was convinced that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons or their ships, but in their indomitable spirit. They would fight on, no matter the odds. As the shuttle passed through a jumble of stars, Cade couldn't help but think about the home they had lost. Eridani 9 was gone, a reminder of the price they had paid for survival. The Dominion would burn entire worlds to achieve their goal of domination, but humanity's resistance would never break. Back at the Human Command Center aboard the fleet's flagship, the mood was somber. The survivors of Eridani 9 had returned, and the casualties were tallied, more than 200 dead, countless more injured. But even in the midst of their grief, there was a quiet strength in the air. Lieutenant Mira Han was at Cade's side as they entered the war room. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the battlefield. A holographic map of the galaxy stretched out before them, glowing with the red marks of the Dominion's territorial holdings. But for the first time since the war had started, there was a new symbol among them, humanity's flag, a bright blue star surrounded by a ring of gold, marking Eridani 9 as the first world in the galaxy to be liberated from the Dominion's grip. "They're going to retaliate," Mira said softly, her eyes narrowed in thought. "They'll send their fleets after us, and they won't be as forgiving next time." Cade nodded, the weight of the reality pressing on his shoulders. "We know. But this victory, this battle, it's more than just a victory on a single planet. It's a statement. The Dominion can't keep going like they have. The galaxy's not just theirs anymore. Humanity's here to stay." Myra's gaze turned from the hologram to Cade. "You really believe that, don't you?" Cade gave her a small, determined smile. "I do. Because no matter what they throw at us, we'll find a way. We've always found a way." Days turned into weeks, and the human fleet began to regroup, replenishing their supplies and fortifying their forces. Humanity was resilient, and every soldier, every engineer, every civilian was committed to the fight. There was no going back, no retreating into the shadows. They would face the Dominion head-on. But as the weeks passed, new reports began to trickle in from across the galaxy. Humanity's victory on Eridani 9 had sparked a ripple effect. Other worlds, oppressed under Dominion rule, began to stir. The message of resistance spread like wildfire. They saw what humanity had done, how they had defied the odds, and they began to rise up as well. There were whispers of rebellion on distant planets, some of them unknown to the Dominion, and more human colonies were being established on the fringes of Dominion space. The tide was turning. Slowly but surely, the galaxies were beginning to take notice. Cade stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching as the stars outside stretched into streaks of light. His thoughts were filled with determination. Humanity had lost, and then they had won. And the war was far from over. "We fight for each other," Cade muttered to himself, remembering Marlowe's words. Always. And with that, the battle for the galaxy continued, humanity's ultimate survival no longer a question of if, but when. The human fleet, now strengthened by the survivors of Eridani 9 and the growing number of allies from across the galaxy, was a force to be reckoned with. Cade stood on the command deck of the flagship, his gaze focused on the holographic map. The Dominion was not an empire easily toppled, but humanity's recent victories had proven something critical: the Dominion could be beaten. They could be defeated. However, the enemy was not going to go down quietly. "The Dominion fleet is on the move," Mira Han said, her voice sharp as she studied the reports. "They're amassing near the Rhea system. Looks like they're preparing for a counteroffensive." Cade's fingers tightened around the edge of the console. The Rhea system was a key location. If the Dominion took it, they would have access to an entire sector of humanity's remaining colonies. Losing it would be catastrophic. "We can't let them take it," Cade replied, his voice low. He turned to Mira. "Start organizing the fleet. I'll brief the commanders." As the room buzzed with activity, Cade's mind raced. The odds were not in their favor. The Dominion had far more ships and resources at their disposal, and despite their recent victories, humanity was still in the early stages of organizing a sustained campaign. They couldn't afford to wait. The battle for Rhea would decide the fate of the next phase of the war. Hours later, Cade stood before his assembled commanders. The room fell silent as he stepped to the front, his posture commanding, his eyes scanning the faces of those who had come to fight alongside him. Every one of them had witnessed the horrors of war, and many had lost comrades, friends, families. But none of them faltered. "Our goal is simple," Cade said, his voice unwavering. "We stop the Dominion at Rhea. No matter the cost. We've already shown them what humanity is capable of. Now, we show them we're not afraid to finish what we started." There were nods from the commanders, their expressions grim but determined. Cade's words had ignited something within them. The spirit of resistance was alive in every one of them. "We know the Dominion will come for us with everything they have," Mira Han added, stepping forward. "But we also know that we've got the will, the ingenuity, and the grit to beat them. They've underestimated us at every turn. We'll make sure they never do again." The plan was set. The fleet would move to engage the Dominion head-on, a full-scale battle for Rhea. It would be brutal, it would be costly, but humanity had no choice but to fight. As the fleet jumped into the Rhea system, the sight that greeted them was a stark one. The Dominion fleet, vast and imposing, filled the void of space. Hundreds of ships, each one a testament to the Dominion's relentless pursuit of control, stood poised for battle. Their formations were impeccable, their weapons ready. The odds were stacked against humanity. But Cade didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. "Engage," Cade ordered, his voice steady. The fleet sprang into action, humanity's ships cutting through space with precision and speed. The battle began with a flash, as plasma cannons and missiles streaked across the void. The Dominion forces moved like a wall, their sheer size and firepower overwhelming. But humanity's fleet was fast, maneuverable, and fierce. Their tactics were unorthodox, guerrilla-style hit-and-run attacks, harassing the Dominion's forces and exploiting every weakness in their formations. It was the first real test of humanity's new strategy. And the Dominion, caught off guard, faltered. Their rigid, traditional tactics were no match for the unpredictability and resourcefulness of the human fleet. The clash of ships in the black void was like a symphony of destruction. Explosions rocked the battlefield as both sides took heavy casualties. Cade's heart raced as he watched from the command deck, his mind constantly calculating their next move. He knew the Dominion would eventually adapt, and when they did, the fight would become even fiercer. And then, it happened. The Dominion flagship, the Dread Sovereign, broke through the chaos, its massive guns charging for a direct strike against the heart of the human fleet. The Dread Sovereign was the pride of the Dominion, its power was unmatched, its shields impenetrable. Cade's mind raced. If they didn't neutralize that ship, the battle was lost. Without hesitation, he turned to Mira. Get me a strike team. We're going in. Myra's eyes widened. Are you sure, Captain? If we go after the Dread Sovereign, we risk losing our entire fleet. I'm sure, Cade said, his voice resolute. We can't win this without taking down their flagship. The human strike team, led by Cade himself, boarded a small but fast attack craft and darted through the chaos of the battlefield. They had one shot at this, one chance to break through the Dread Sovereign's defenses. The ship was a fortress, its weaponry powerful enough to obliterate entire fleets in a single volley. But Cade knew their only hope was to get close enough to disable its core, to make it vulnerable. As they neared the massive Dominion vessel, enemy fire lashed out at them from all directions. The attack craft shook violently with each hit, but Cade's crew held steady, pushing forward. They were almost there. Get ready, Cade called, his hands steady on the controls. We go in fast, hit hard, and then get out. No time for second chances. With a final burst of speed, the attack craft slammed into the hull of the Dread Sovereign, deploying its team of engineers and demolition experts. They worked quickly, setting charges along the ship's power conduits. Cade's heart pounded in his chest as he kept watch, covering their retreat. Charges set, shouted one of his crew members. Time to go. Cade didn't need any further encouragement. He activated the thrusters, propelling the team away just as the charges detonated. The Dread Sovereign shuddered as the explosions tore through its systems, disabling its core and sending it into a slow, helpless drift. The Dominion flagship was no more. With the Dread Sovereign incapacitated, the tide of the battle shifted. The Dominion fleet, suddenly leaderless and vulnerable, was overwhelmed by the relentless attacks of humanity's forces. The Dominion had underestimated them yet again, and this time, it would cost them dearly. As the final shots were fired and the last of the Dominion ships retreated, Cade stood on the bridge, watching the battle fade into the distance. Humanity had done the impossible. They had taken on the Dominion, and they had won. But Cade knew that the war was far from over. This was just one victory in a long and bloody struggle. The Dominion would regroup, rebuild, and come for them again. But now, humanity knew something important: they could win. Let's get ready for what comes next, Cade said, his voice firm. And so, the war raged on. Months had passed since the battle for Rhea, and humanity's victory over the Dominion flagship, the Dread Sovereign, had shaken the foundations of the Empire. The galaxy was not the same place it had been before. Humanity, once regarded as insignificant in the eyes of the greater galactic powers, had proven themselves not only capable of survival, but capable of turning the tide in a war that seemed destined for their defeat. But Cade knew the fight wasn't over. The Dominion, though weakened, was still a formidable force. Their reach was vast, their armies numerous, and their thirst for control unyielding. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since the war began, Cade felt something new stirring within the human fleet: hope. Humanity had come a long way since the days when they were mere pawns in the Empire's game. They had fought tooth and nail to survive, to resist, to push back against impossible odds. And now, they were poised to take the fight to the heart of the Dominion itself. Cade stood before a vast map of the galaxy, the holographic lines of various star systems flickering in front of him. The human forces were scattered, stretched thin across multiple sectors, but they were united in purpose. The resistance movement had grown, and now, it was time to launch a decisive campaign. Mira, Cade called, his voice steady as he scanned the holographic map. It's time to strike at the heart. We're going to push forward into Dominion space, take their most strategic worlds, and show them that humanity is no longer something they can dismiss. Mira Han, ever the sharp strategist, stepped up beside him. Are we sure we're ready for this? We've fought well, but the Dominion won't go down easily. They'll throw everything they have left at us. I know, Cade replied, a quiet confidence in his words. But we've learned something important. We don't need to be bigger or stronger than them. We just need to be smarter. We've already proven we can win. Now we need to make them feel the weight of their underestimation. The human fleet gathered in full force, ready to embark on the most dangerous offensive of the war. Ships of all sizes, from the nimble strike crafts to the imposing capital ships, lined up in formation. The Dominion was still a giant in the galaxy, but humanity had learned how to fight giants. And more importantly, humanity had learned how to win. As the fleet jumped into Dominion-controlled space, the sight of the vast enemy territory was enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. The Dominion had spread like a cancer across the galaxy, suffocating freedom wherever it could. But humanity was about to change that. The first target, Velzaris, a strategic world that held a crucial resource, one that the Dominion relied on for its war machine. Cade's mission was simple: strike fast, hit hard, and cripple their supply chain. They didn't have time to waste. The fleet moved in swiftly, the humans using every advantage at their disposal. The Dominion had grown complacent, relying on their size and overwhelming firepower, but humanity had learned to fight a different kind of war, one that didn't play by the rules the Dominion had set. The battle for Velzaris was brutal. The Dominion fleet met the humans head-on, their ships bristling with weaponry, their defenses nearly impenetrable. But the humans had the advantage of speed and precision. They darted through the chaos, launching strikes at key targets, disabling the Dominion's crucial infrastructure. The battle raged for hours, each moment more intense than the last. And then, in the heart of the fight, something extraordinary happened. The Dominion flagship for this region, the Regent's Wrath, came into view. Unlike the Dread Sovereign, the Regent's Wrath was a ship of legend, larger, more powerful, and more fortified than anything humanity had ever faced. It was the pride of the Dominion. Cade's mind raced. He knew that taking down the Regent's Wrath was their best chance to win this battle. It was their opportunity to deliver a devastating blow to the heart of Dominion control. "Captain, we need to fall back," Mira said urgently. "If we engage the Regent's Wrath, we risk losing everything." Cade's eyes hardened. "No. We've come this far, Mira. We take it down, or we don't win this war." The strike team, led by Cade, launched once more, darting through enemy fire, pushing forward toward the heart of the Dominion's flagship. The Regent's Wrath was a monstrous vessel, its weapons blazing with intensity. The odds were nearly insurmountable. But humanity had one thing the Dominion could never replicate: the will to fight for each other. The team worked with unyielding precision, sabotaging the ship's weapons and shields. Each step was more perilous than the last, but with each blow they struck, the Regent's Wrath faltered. And then, with a final surge of power, the strike team planted the charges that would end the battle once and for all. The explosion that followed was like nothing Cade had ever seen before. The Regent's Wrath cracked and buckled, its massive frame splitting apart as its core went critical. The shockwave ripped through the fleet, sending Dominion ships into disarray. The battle was over. The victory at Velzaris was a turning point. The Dominion's once unshakable grip on the galaxy was beginning to fracture. News of humanity's victory spread like wildfire across the stars. Worlds that had been silent in fear now began to rise in defiance. As Cade stood on the command deck, watching the aftermath of the battle, he couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Humanity had taken on the impossible, and they had won. But he knew this was just the beginning. "We've won the battle," Cade said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. "But the war isn't over. The Dominion may be broken, but they're not finished. It's up to us now to make sure they never come back." Mira nodded, her eyes filled with the same determination. "We'll make sure they don't." And as the fleet moved on toward the next challenge, humanity stood united, a force to be reckoned with, a testament to the strength, resilience, and sheer willpower that had brought them from the brink of annihilation to the dawn of a new era. For humanity had proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they were the ultimate survivors. A vast space battlefield in the midst of a galactic war, with a diverse fleet of human ships engaging a massive Dominion warship. Explosions light up the void as smaller, faster human ships perform daring hit-and-run tactics against the towering, imposing Dominion vessels. The human flagship, sleek and advanced, stands at the forefront of the attack, while the massive Dominion flagship, the Regent's Wrath, looms ominously in the background, with energy blasts and debris filling the scene. The stars and distant planets serve as a dramatic backdrop to the chaos of battle, highlighting the desperation and determination of the human forces in their fight for survival. This should capture the epic and intense atmosphere of the final battle from the story.